The building was made of glass and ambition. At 6:03 a.m., long before the boardroom lights flickered on or espresso machines hummed, Marcus pushed a mop across the marble lobby of Laurent Capital. His reflection moved with him. Steel wool hair, uniform sleeves rolled to the elbows. He scrubbed quietly, deliberately, with the precision of a man who once translated foreign peace accords but now translated mud into shine. His cart squeaked, buckets sloshing, as he turned the corner. And then he paused, past the glass wall of the studio next door. A girl was dancing, twirling, faltering, smiling barefoot on old scuffed wood, wearing mismatched socks and dreams stitched into her too small leotard. Marcus watched through the fogged pane. Pride warmed his eyes. She didn't see him. She never did at this hour. He mouthed the counts with her. 1.2. Lift 3. And for the girl stumbled, Marcus flinched, as if it were his own foot that betrayed him. She tried again and again. And when she landed the turn, arms soft like ribbon, Marcus let out the breath he hadn't noticed he was holding. 11 years old, strong-willed, hungry, dancing on hope and reheated lentils. He adjusted the strap on his mop, bucket, and whispered, "You're getting better, baby." Behind him, heels clicked, fast, sharp, corporate. Marcus froze, turned. A young assistant stood in the corridor, holding a leather folder and impatience in her mouth. "Ms. Laurent wants to see you." Now, Marcus blinked. The warmth of the dance gone right now. "Yes, bring your badge." He nodded. His back straightened. The mop stayed behind. As the assistant led him down the sterile hallway, Marcus cast one last glance over his shoulder. Through the glass, Lena was still dancing, but she didn't know her father had just been summoned like a man without a name. Not yet. A harsh voice calls his name. The CEO's assistant is looking for him. The boardroom was a cathedral of power. High glass walls, leather chairs, chrome water pitchers, sweating beside untouched notebooks. The room breathed silence. Marcus stood in the doorway holding a cleaning cloth, unsure if he was meant to knock or vanish. No one looked up. Executives in sleek suits circled the table like wolves around Prophet. A croissant had crumbled. Buttery flakes scattered near the corner chair. That's why he was summoned. Not a spill, not a leak, crumbs. He stepped in slowly, carefully. "Sorry," he whispered, head lowered. Camille Laurent's voice cut through the air like ice cracking. "Just get it done." Quietly, Marcus nodded. He crouched near the chair, cloth in hand, brushing crumbs into his palm like they were shards of something sacred. Lena's new ballet shoes. That's what he kept thinking about. Crumbs of croissant could be a step closer to a full meal. Or a step away from eviction. He moved carefully, not daring to breathe too loudly. But even silence was too loud. Someone chuckled. Then another joined in. The intern to his right crinkled a snack wrapper and dropped it on the floor, just inches from Marcus's hand. "Oops," she said, smirking. "Missed." A few others stifled laughter. Marcus froze. His palm tightened. "Keep going," Camille said, not looking up from her tablet. "And maybe HR won't have to revisit the janitorial budget." The room quieted. Marcus swallowed something hard in his throat. He stood. Slowly, back aching from more than the crouch, his eyes met Camille's. Just stared through him like a fingerprint on glass. "I didn't mean to interrupt your meeting," he said softly. "You didn't," she replied flatly, tapping her screen. "You just reminded us what happens when people stop trying." Marcus's lips parted. No words came. The conference door opened. The assistant reappeared, holding a folder. "HR wants to review janitorial contracts next week," she said aloud. Camille nodded without looking up. "Schedule it." Marcus turned away before his face gave him away. Before the pride he'd been holding cracked right there in front of them as he pushed the cart back out into the hallway. The laughter faded behind him, clinging to his uniform like dust he couldn't clean off. CEO Camille Laurent glares at him and coldly instructs HR to review the janitorial contracts. The break area wasn't meant for janitors. That much was unspoken. Marcus knew it, even as he entered with his mop and bucket, eyes low. His shift wasn't over, but the hallway smelled like espresso and entitlement. 3 interns stood in a cluster, dressed like cover models, and talking like no one else existed. He passed them without a word. A cup tipped. Coffee sloshed. The dark liquid spread across the tile like an accusation. One said, laughing, "Man's got one job." Marcus grabbed paper towels from the counter. The second intern leaned against the fridge, holding a protein shake. "Bet he doesn't even speak English," he muttered, loud enough to sting. The third, a blonde with 2 white teeth, cocked her head. "Maybe he speaks janitor." Marcus knelt and started mopping silently, cheeks burning. "Bonjour," she added mockingly. "Voulez-vous mop le café?" He stopped, his hands still, his chest tight. Then, softly, not angry, just fluent and clean. "G parle 6 langues. Don't do que vous ne pourriez pas reconnaître sur une carte. I speak 6 languages. 2 you probably couldn't find on a map, closing parenthesis, silence. The room froze. Even the coffee seemed to stop spreading. One intern whispered. Marcus stood up, finished the last wipe, and dropped the towel in the bin, then turned and walked out. Not fast, not angry, just taller. The interns didn't laugh again. Behind him, one of them whispered, "Who is he?" Marcus didn't turn around, but this time, the mop didn't feel heavy in his hands. One intern asks him something in French, and he answers perfectly, stunning everyone. The city's winter chill had teeth that bit through threadbare gloves. Marcus didn't bother zipping his jacket. The walk home was short. Silence followed him like a shadow. He carried Lena's broken ballet slipper in one hand, its torn strap dangling like an apology. Streetlights blinked overhead. A delivery van rumbled past. Somewhere, someone laughed, but it wasn't for him. He reached their building, 4 stories of faded brick and tired windows. A rusted stairwell creaked under his boots. 2nd floor, apartment to be. He paused at the door. From inside, faint music spilled out. A YouTube ballet tutorial. Lena was still practicing. He didn't enter. Instead, he stood in the hallway, staring at the slipper in his palm. It was soft, worn, molded to her foot from years of repetition and refusal to quit. It looked like her, tired but full of grace. He sat on the stairs, hunched over, and let the quiet stretch long. The cold didn't matter. In his mind, a flicker of another life, a sunlit office in Geneva. French newspapers, a younger Marcus translating between diplomats, headphones on, voice calm and sharp. His wife's voice, laughing in the background, the sound faded. All that remained was the broken slipper in his hands, and Lena's soft, off-rhythm pirouettes through the apartment wall. He finally stood, pocketed the shoe, and entered the apartment as quietly as he'd left. Flashback memory of his life before. America, as a translator in France, the kitchen smelled like boiled rice and quiet hope. Marcus stirred the last bit of lentils in a small pot, making it look fuller than it was. The spoon clinked against metal like a soft clock ticking down dot at the table. Lena practiced her foot positions using a wooden chair as a makeshift bar. First, she whispered to herself, second, third. He turned off the stove and plated 2 portions, hers slightly larger. "Dinner," he said gently. She sat, cheeks pink from movement, eyes brighter than they should be after a long day at school and self-taught ballet. "You're not eating?" she asked. He smiled. Already did it work. It was a lie, but he'd gotten good at those, the soft kind, the kind that protected. She nodded and dug in, shoveling rice and lentils with the urgency of hunger. "You know," she mumbled between bites, "Miss Allie said the scholarship auditions are tomorrow." He froze. "Tomorrow, did she?" he asked, forcing casual. "Yeah," her voice dropped. She said I should try, but my shoes. She looked down at her feet, threadbare socks, pink with faded dreams. Marcus stared at her quietly, then reached into his coat and placed the broken slipper on the table. "I'll figure it out," he said. Lena nodded. She believed him. She always did, and that broke him more than the hunger, more than the cold. He watched her eat, then pushed his untouched plate slightly closer to her. She didn't notice. He didn't let her. Lena's dance. Scholarship audition is tomorrow. They can't afford new shoes. The apartment was quiet after Lena fell asleep. Marcus sat on the floor beside an old wooden trunk shoved into the corner of the closet. Its metal latches rusted, a faded red sticker on the side. Air France, CDG2, JFK. Then opened it. Inside, papers yellowed at the edges, soft leather notebooks, and envelopes still scented faintly of Paris rain. He pulled one out, a laminated certificate, corners curled. Interpret official organization. Day Nations Eunice's name, Marc Chevalier. Not sir, not hey, janitor. Marc Chevalier, the man who once translated treaties, the man who whispered peace into cold rooms with words not his own. He pulled out a photo. A woman in a pale dress, standing on the Seine Bridge, laughing. His wife, Elise, gone 6 years now, taken by illness, not war. His hands trembled as he unfolded a letter she once wrote. You don't need a title to have worth. You don't need their permission to be brilliant. But promise me you'll never disappear. He had disappeared. Grief had devoured his name, his voice, his place in the world. He became invisible on purpose. With slow breath, Marcus took the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in the trash. Then, one by one, he fed the papers to the stove's small flame diplomas, certificates. The photo smoke curled around him like a language he no longer spoke. The last to burn was the name. He watched it go and whispered, "That man is gone." He burns the old documents. Whispering that man is gone, Marcus rolled the mop bucket down the hallway like always, wheels squeaking, bucket half full, sleeves damp. The morning shift had just begun. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. But the mop moved like it remembered even when he didn't. The hallway was quiet. Until at WASN, single quotes to Camille Laurent's heels echoed before she appeared. She wasn't alone. A man in a navy suit trailed behind her, tablet in hand. Nodding to everything she said, they stopped in front of him. Marcus straightened, nodded respectfully. "Morning, ma'am." Camille didn't smile. "Marcus," she said coolly, "we're restructuring. HR will notify you, but I thought you should hear it from me." His chest tightened. "Restructuring." She nodded. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." He stared at her, not angry, just still, he had no words. Only years. Years of waxed floors, quiet dignity, invisible labor. "Understood," he finally said. Camille looked at her watch. "Security will collect your badge." The man next to her avoided eye contact. Marcus reached into his shirt pocket and slowly removed the ID card. He handed it over without a word. She turned to walk away. But he spoke in soft, perfect French. "Vous savez, DCEQJ. Purdue. You know nothing of what I've..." Lost. Camille stopped. The words hung in the air like perfume in a sealed room. She didn't respond, didn't turn, just walked. Away. Marcus stood there, badge gone. Job gone, but not empty. Not entirely. Marcus calmly says in perfect French, "Vous savez rien, DCEQJ, Purdue." The hallway emptied. Only quiet footsteps remained, and one pair stopped just before the corner. Isabel, Camille's executive assistant, stood half-hidden behind a glass door, fingers still curled around the edge. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but she heard it. Every syllable, "Vous savez rien, DCEQJ, Purdue," the fluency, the pain, the precision, that wasn't tourist French. That was mother tongue sorrow. She stared after Marcus, watching him walk out of the building like a man who had left something behind, or maybe just reclaimed it. Later that day, back at her desk, she searched. She didn't know what she was looking for, but instinct is louder than rules. She typed his name, Marcus Laurent, janitor. New York. Nothing. She frowned. Paused, then tried again. Marc Chevalier. The browser blinked. A dozen results. Articles in French. Diplomatic awards. Archived video clips from unpeace conferences. A photo clear and sharp of a younger Marcus in a black suit and translator headset. Seated between world leaders, voice calm. Her breath caught. She clicked another article. A decorated interpreter, fluent in 6 languages. Retired suddenly after the death of his wife. She printed the photo, hands trembling, that face. It was him, the man mopping her floor for 3 years. She rose from her chair, folder in hand, and walked toward Camille's office. She didn't knock. She placed the photo gently on Camille's desk. Nothing else, just truth in black and white. She finds an old European newspaper. Clipping with Marcus's photo, the pawnshop door creaked, like a throat clearing itself inside. The air was heavy with dust and forgotten stories. Instruments hung on the wall next to tarnished rings and cracked picture frames. Marcus stepped in slowly, a wrapped bundle in his hands, a book, leather-bound, gold-etched, French poetry. Signed by the author, it had belonged to Elise. He set it gently on the glass counter. The shopkeeper squinted, adjusting his glasses. "Well, that's a beauty, Marcus." Said nothing how much you need. Marcus glanced down at the ballet slipper in his coat pocket, the torn one, and thought of the audition tomorrow. Enough for a child's dance shoes. Good ones. The shopkeeper opened the book, leafing through the delicate pages. "Rare edition," he muttered. But rare doesn't mean valuable these days. People don't read French poetry in this neighborhood. Marcus gave a tired smile. They should. The man looked up at him longer this time, eyes narrowing. "I know this name," he said slowly, tapping the inside cover. "Chevalier." Then he looked up again, this time with recognition. "You're Monsieur Chevalier, aren't you?" Marcus froze. A beat passed. Then softly, "I was." The man nodded. Respectful now. He placed the money on the counter. More than Marcus expected. No receipt needed. Marcus took it without a word. Outside, snow had begun to fall, lights scattered, like ash from burned pages. He walked down the street, clutching the small paper bag with the new slippers inside. Not new dot, but clean dot, and strong enough to hold a dream. Pawnshop owner calls him Monsieur Chevalier, a name he hasn't heard in years. The dance studio was warm, but Lena's fingers were cold. She stood at the edge of the hardwood floor, clutching the strap of her dance bag. Other girls stretched nearby, newer shoes, newer tights. Confident chatter, she didn't speak. Marcus stood behind the glass, hidden, like always. The slippers he bought her, gently used, off-white, were laced tightly to her ankles. She touched the toe, then looked up as her name was called, Lena Laurent. She stepped forward. The judges didn't smile. A nod. A gesture. The music began. It wasn't the right tempo, just slightly slower, but Lena adjusted. She always adjusted first position, then plie. Then lift out her arms were deliberate, not polished. Her toes pointed sharp. But one ankle quivered slightly. She didn't falter. Marcus held his breath. She turned, not perfect, but honest. Her face lifted toward the light. The same way Elise once danced across their small Paris apartment floor, laughing, holding their newborn in one arm. Now Lena danced with her. Mother's silence and her father's quiet rage in her bones. It wasn't flawless, but it was raw. And when the music stopped, she exhaled. The judges scribbled. One leaned toward the other and whispered something. Marcus caught it. Just one word. Parisian. Lena bowed and walked off the floor. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just looked through the glass at her father, and he nodded once. Eyes full, she had danced her name. She had danced their past. She had danced for both of them. Judge whispers, "We've seen this style before. Very Parisian, the Laurent capital." Penthouse glittered with golden glass. Waiters floated through the room with champagne trays. Laughter bounced off marble. Camille stood near the window, surrounded by foreign investors, mostly French, mostly old money. "Let me introduce you to our top advisors," she said, waving toward a group across the room. A man in a gray scarf leaned closer to her. "Pardon, Ms. Laurent. I heard something curious today." She raised an eyebrow. "Your janitor, the one who cleaned the conference room last week." He responded to a question in fluent French, flawless Parisian accent. Camille sipped her wine. "Yes, I heard." He mopped with flair. The group chuckled, the scarfed man didn't. "I wasn't joking." Camille's lips curved into a polite smile. "I'm sure he's watched Les Miserables too many times." Another investor leaned in. "What was his name again?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Marcus? Or Mark? I don't know. He's gone now, restructuring." The scarfed man went still. "Marc Chevalier." She hesitated. "Why?" He leaned back, his voice shifting reverent now. That name once sat beside presidents. He interpreted the Geneva Agreement of '09. He was called Le Fantôme des Langues, Ghost of Tongues. Camille's smile faltered. "I assure you," she said softly, "he was just a janitor." But her fingers tightened slightly on the stem of her glass, and across the room, the scarfed man whispered to another, "If it's the same man, he didn't just fire a janitor. You erased a name the world once listened to. One French guest says, Chevalier. That's a name we once trusted with treaties. The office was dark. Everyone had gone home, except Isabel. She sat at her desk, screen glowing. Fingers moving fast but careful. Search, scroll, translate, repeat. She'd heard the name again. Chevalier whispered at the investor dinner. And it wasn't just a coincidence. Now she clicked a link. UN Conference Archives, Marc Chevalier, Chief Interpreter. A video loaded. A younger Marcus appeared on screen, seated between global diplomats, headphones on, eyes steady. He spoke into a microphone, French to English, English to Arabic. His tone measured, poetic, unshaken. Another click. A scanned magazine spread the silent bridge. Marc Chevalier's role in historic peace talks. She leaned back. Heart-pounding. How had this man, this world-renowned interpreter, become the quiet janitor mopping her hallway? Why hadn't anyone seen it? Why hadn't she? She found a PDF in French, an award announcement. Elise Chevalier's name was there to wife, ballerina, cultural ambassador. Deceased. A photo next to the article showed Marcus and Elise on stage. Smiling gently into the camera, Isabel's throat tightened. She printed the article. Then the photo. Then one more clipping. A headline dated 6 years ago. Interpreter resigns after wife's death. Disappears from public life. She slid the papers into a folder and stared at them. This man had carried all of that quietly, invisibly. The elevator, DINGED. She rose and walked to Camille's office. No words, no appointment, just a folder placed softly on a cold glass desk, and the truth finally on paper. She places the file on Camille's desk, unrequested. The phone rang just as Lena was tying her hair into a bun. Marcus answered with his usual gentle hello. A woman's voice came through, formal, clipped. Is this Mr. Laurent? Yes. This is the Midtown Ballet Academy. We've reviewed Lena's audition. Her form, her timing, her style. It was ... unforgettable. Marcus closed his eyes, smiling. She's gifted, the voice continued. We'd like to offer her a conditional scholarship. His heart lifted. Conditional? The pause was long. There's one issue, she said gently. We attempted to confirm your residence for paperwork. The address on record is no longer valid. Mail was returned. Marcus turned toward the window. The eviction notice still hung by a single strip of tape. Between places, he said quietly. I understand, the woman said, but we need a stable address for registration. Please update us as soon as possible. He nodded, though she couldn't see. Of course. The call ended. Lena stepped into the room, hopeful. Was that them? Marcus hesitated. They loved you. That's it, she asked, eyes searching. He forced a smile. That's it, she twirled, laughing softly. Told you, I nailed it. He nodded, then turned toward the door. Outside, night had fallen. He stepped into the cold air with his coat too thin and hope too heavy. One thought rang in his mind. He had to go back just once more to the building that had erased him because Lena's dream couldn't sleep on a sidewalk. Marcus gets desperate and considers going back to the office one last time. The lobby of Laurent Capital buzzed with morning urgency, heels clicking, phones ringing, elevator doors sliding open and shut. Marcus stepped inside like a ghost, walking back into a house that no longer remembered him. No badge, no uniform, just his old coat and a paper folder clutched in his hand. Lena's scholarship form, blank where an address should be. Security glanced up, but didn't move. He rode the elevator alone to the top floor. Nerves tucked into his chest like folded paper. The doors opened. Camille stood at the other end of the hallway, mid conversation with two partners. Her voice trailed off when she saw him. He walked forward, calm but not slow. Marcus, she said, one brow raised. This isn't 5 minutes, he said, steady. No more. The partners excused themselves. The hallway felt narrower. Marcus handed her the folder. My daughter was offered a scholarship, he said. She needs an address. I need a job, even part-time. I'm not asking for charity. She opened the folder. Scanned the form, his voice dropped. You fired a man you didn't know. But I am someone. I've been someone. Camille crossed her arms, guarded. And now what? You want me to pretend you were never a janitor? No, he said quietly. I want you to know that even janitors carry history. Some just choose not to speak it. She studied him then, scoffed. Even broken clocks are right twice a day. Marcus held her gaze for one long second. Then turned. He didn't need her belief. Just the address, Camille scoffs. Even broken clocks are right once. Camille entered her office with her usual swift stride, heels sharp against marble. But something stopped her. A folder sat on her glass desk. No label. No note. She opened it. Photos, articles, foreign documents. The first was a newspaper clipping. Chevalier interprets landmark accord. She flipped the page. An image marked, younger, standing at a podium beside French diplomats. Eyes focused, mouth mid-sentence. She stared at it longer than she meant to. Next, a certificate bearing the seal of the United Nations for outstanding linguistic service during international conflict resolution. A photo of him and his wife, arms around each other. Sunlight dancing in her hair, Lena in her arms, still a baby. Camille sat down slowly. She hadn't expected this. Not this weight, not this truth. He had carried all of this in silence, under fluorescent lights. Beneath a mop and rolled-up sleeves, she placed the photo down gently. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent. But something inside her had shifted. Not guilt, not yet, but a crack. A hairline fracture in the porcelain shell she'd spent years perfecting. She leaned back, folded her hands, and whispered. What have I done? Camille quietly whispers. What have I done? The conference room smelled of fresh espresso and expectation. Camille entered with her usual poise, but her fingers fidgeted with the clasp on her tablet case. Around the long glass table, a group of visiting French investors chatted, laughter soft but pointed. At the head sat Monsieur Arnaud, the scarfed man from the dinner, eyes sharp, posture regal. Camille took her seat across from him. I trust you're enjoying your visit, she began. I was, Arnaud replied, setting down his cup, until I discovered your company discarded a national treasure. Camille stiffened. Excuse me, I verified it myself. Your janitor, he's Marc Chevalier. She blinked. He continued. I once sat in a war room in Brussels. Countries waited hours for his arrival before speaking. He didn't just translate language, he diffused tension. Camille swallowed. He never told anyone who he was. Arnaud leaned forward. Great men rarely do. Silence stretched between them. Another investor cleared his throat. Is it true you let him go? She didn't answer. Arnaud sat back, calm but cold. Unless he is reinstated immediately, we'll reconsider our partnership. We do not invest in companies that erase dignity. Camille's mouth opened slightly. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about respect, the kind Marcus had carried quietly. While she had worn hers like armor, her voice was softer when she spoke. Speak with him, Arnaud nodded once, but his eyes said more. You're already too late. Camille must now choose pride or redemption. The bus bench was cold, even under Marcus's coat. Lena lay curled beside him, head on his lap, wrapped in his old work hoodie. The city moved around them, headlights, footsteps, horns. But inside this moment, everything was still. She shifted in her sleep, mumbling. He brushed her curls back gently. You were brilliant, he whispered dot above them. A flickering street lamp buzzed softly, casting fractured shadows on the sidewalk. A discarded flyer danced across the pavement. Midtown Ballet, Winter Gala, scholarships awarded soon. He exhaled through his nose, shoulders stiff from holding it all in. They hadn't found a shelter tonight, too full. Too late. Too invisible dot. Lena stirred again, eyes half open. Do people who sleep in beds dream more than us? His chest tightened. I don't think dreams come from pillows, he said softly. They come from the people who don't give up on them. She nodded, eyes already drifting closed again. He looked down at his phone, screen cracked. Battery low. One new email from an address he didn't recognize. Subject, request for meeting, Marc. Chevalhaise's hand trembled. He read it twice, and again the French. Investor Arnaud, he had found him. Hope didn't bloom suddenly. It returned slowly. Like blood to a numb hand, he looked at Lena. Then, at the night sky tomorrow might be. Different. May be. Marcus seized the investor's email on his cracked, Phone. The small meeting room on the 12th floor hadn't been used in years. The light above the whiteboard flickered faintly, and one of the chairs had a broken wheel. But it was quiet, and Private Marcus entered slowly. Unsure Arnaud stood near the window, scarf draped neatly over his coat. He turned with a smile that held warmth and weight. "Monsieur Chevalier," he said quietly. "Some names don't fade," Arnaud replied. "They wait to be spoken again." They shook hands, not like employer to worker, like equals. "I reviewed the merger documents," Arnaud said, tapping the folder on the table. They were poorly translated, lacked nuance, no ear for tone. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Most don't notice tone anymore." "You do." He handed Marcus a page, dense with legal French. "Tell me what this really says," Arnaud said. Marcus read it once, then again, slower. He began to speak, translating not just words, but meaning, subtext, cultural phrasing, emotional implication. Arnaud watched, nodding when Marcus finished. The room was silent. Then, "Why is this man?" Arnaud said aloud, turning toward the open door. "Not running your international team?" Camille stood just outside, arms folded. She didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Marcus looked between them. He didn't feel small anymore, just seen the investor says, "Why is this man not running your international team?" Camille stood in the hallway long after the meeting. Door closed. She clutched her tablet like a lifeline, knuckles pale. On the screen, emails buzzed in. Feedback, questions, agendas, but none louder than what she'd just heard. Marcus, or Marc Chevalier, wasn't just a janitor. He was a man the world had once listened to, and she had silenced him that afternoon. In front of the board, she spoke fast, polished as ever. "We're restructuring our international team," she said. "We'll be promoting internally, no need for outside recruitment." Arnaud sat across from her, unimpressed. "I assume that includes your janitor?" he asked flatly. A few heads turned. Murmurs began. Camille's jaw tightened. "He lacks current credentials, and frankly, I believe he's more suited to other tasks." "Other tasks?" Arnaud repeated. "Do you mean survival?" Her composure cracked just slightly. "This is a business," she snapped, "not a charity." Arnaud leaned back, calm. "No, but it should be a place that knows the value of its people. We trusted this company with our money. Now I wonder if we can trust its judgment." He stood. "We'll pause the merger. Until this is corrected." The room fell silent. Camille didn't respond. COULDN. Single quotes. She watched as he walked out and took her power with him. And in the silence, he left behind. Camille finally understood. She hadn't just fired a man, she'd erased a legacy. The investor pulls his funding unless Marcus is rehired. The phone call came early. Too early. Marcus sat on the edge of a park bench, wrapping Lena's breakfast, a boiled egg, and half an apple in foil when it rang. Camille's voice was as sharp as ever, but lighter, forced, polite. "Marcus, you've been reinstated." He stayed quiet. Same position. Same rate, she continued. "Report to maintenance by 8. HR will reactivate your badge." "Anything else?" he asked softly a beat. "No." The line clicked dead. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just folded the foil slowly and whispered, "We're going back, baby." Lena looked up, eyes hopeful. "You got your job again?" He nodded. "That's good, right?" He hesitated. "Then, it's a start." At Laurent Capital, no one clapped. No one nodded. No one looked. Marcus walked past the receptionist without a word. The mop was in the same closet, the same rubber gloves, the same locker. On the inside of the locker door, someone had written in marker, "Know your place." He stared at it a moment, then peeled the sticker off, tossed it in the trash. He didn't need their approval. He needed Lena's dream to live, and for now, that meant sweeping halls where he once whispered diplomacy as he mopped the marble floor outside Camille's office. She walked by without stopping, but he noticed her pause just for a second. He didn't look up, but this time, he wasn't cleaning for them. He was claiming space. One quiet stroke at a time. He accepts silently, not for them, but for Lena. The apartment was warmer that night, not from heat, but from something softer. Lena sat on the floor with a notebook, sketching ballet poses from memory. Her cheeks glowed from the excitement of rehearsal. The scholarship still wasn't official, but she could feel it close. Almost real. Marcus watched her quietly from the small kitchen, holding a mug of water like it was tea. Papa, she asked, not looking up. Why do you speak French? The question stopped him. She glanced at him, curious. I heard someone say it today. That you? Translated for presidents. He sat down slowly across from her. Who told you that? She shrugged. Miss Isabel from the office smiled at me weird. Like she knew something. Marcus looked down. Is it true? He hesitated, then nodded. I used to be someone else, Lena, before Mama got sick. Before we moved here, who? She whispered. He smiled faintly. A man with a suit. A name the world sometimes listened to. I helped people understand each other. She blinked. Like a translator, he nodded. Like a bridge. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to see me for who I am now, not who I used to be. She reached across the floor and took his hand. I don't care who you were. A pause. I just wish I'd known you were. Magic. Marcus's throat tightened. She laid her head on his arm, and for the first time in years, he let someone lean on his past. Marcus finally tells her about his old life, and why he left. Itherain tapped gently against the windows. A soft rhythm like fingers on a piano. Marcus sat on the floor with an old shoebox pulled from the top of the closet. Dust clung to the edges. He hadn't opened it in years. Lena sat beside him, legs crossed, watching closely. Inside were letters, dozens, their envelopes yellowed, some edges curled from time and tears. He pulled one out. The handwriting was delicate, French cursive. Elise's, your mother wrote to me almost every day during our first year apart, he said quietly. While I worked abroad, he opened the letter. Mon amour, when you speak, people stop fighting. That's your gift. But at home, you are just mine. And Lena leaned in, eyes wide. She wrote that. He nodded. She was light, he said, voice thick. Where I was logic, I used words to build bridges. She used silence to keep peace. He handed her a letter, one with a drawing inside. A tiny sketch of Lena as a baby in ballet shoes. She always knew, he whispered, that you'd dance. Lena clutched the letter to her chest. She looked up, voice quiet. What happened after she died? Marcus stared at the box, then closed it. I stopped translating. She looked at him. For others, he shook his head. For myself, Lena didn't speak. She just leaned into him, head against his shoulder. And in that quiet, something began to translate again. Not words, but grief and love. Lena finds a letter her mother once wrote him. You are the bridge between worlds. The hallway smelled of lemon wax and fluorescent routine. Marcus moved slowly, mop in hand, rhythm steady. Same uniform, same bucket, same silence, but something was different. Inside him, the quiet no longer ached. It listened. Each stroke across the tile felt less like erasure and more like reclamation. A man choosing to show up, even if no one asked. No one greeted him. They rarely did, but one young intern, the same who once mocked his silence, stepped aside as he passed, not out of fear, out of recognition, not for who he was, but for how he moved. Now Camille walked past him near the elevators. She didn't stop, but she looked at him briefly. That was new, in the glass reflection. He saw himself, mop in one hand, posture straight. Eyes steady, he wasn't invisible. Just overlooked, and that was their mistake. Not his, later. In the break room, he poured himself a cup of tea, sat quietly at the table no one used. He read one of Elise's old letters again, folded small into his breast pocket. A single line echoed, You are allowed to start over without forgetting who you were. Marcus smiled and took another sip, this time. He's not ashamed. The company lobby was transformed, glossy floors, soft lighting, a rented grand piano in the corner. It was the annual charity gala, and employees filled the space in tailored suits and careful smiles. Camille stood near the stage, glass of wine in hand, only half listening to the COO's speech. A woman in black approached the mic. We have a surprise performance from a young talent, Lena Laurent. Camille's brow twitched. That last name. Marcus stood quietly in the back, beside a potted fern, hands folded, watching. Waiting, Lena stepped onto the stage in a simple white dress. No sparkle, no flair, just grace. The music began, a soft waltz, and she moved, not with polish, with purpose. Each step deliberate, toes grazing the floor like memory. Her arms cut through the air like brushstrokes, painting a story the crowd didn't know, but felt. Camille watched, transfixed. Her mind wandered a flash of her own childhood, watching her mother dance in a Paris flat. Long before money hardened her spine, she blinked. Lena leaped a quiet arc, landing soft as breath when the music ended. The crowd clapped politely. Camille didn't clap right away. She just whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, "She dances like Paris." Marcus heard her, but he said nothing, because Lena had already said enough, without a single word. Camille whispers, "She dances like Paris." Camille closed her office door behind her and let the quiet press in. She walked to the mirror above her bookshelf, a wide pane framed in gold, untouched by fingerprints. Her own reflection stared back, perfect suit, sharp collar, unreadable eyes. On the desk sat a photograph. She hadn't looked at it in years. She picked it up now, a girl herself, no more than 7, spinning in a faded living room. In the background, a woman smiled. Arms raised mid-dash pose. Her mother, a dancer who once gave up the stage to raise a daughter. Alone, Camille swallowed hard. She remembered watching her mother stretch by the window. How her feet bled silently into slippers. How she twirled anyway, every night. Camille had chosen numbers. Walls, armor, but Lena. Lena danced like someone who still had a mother spinning. Somewhere inside her, she placed the photo back on the desk. Then opened the folder Isabelle had left weeks ago. Marc, Chevalier, interpreter, husband, father, and now, her janitor, her mistake. She stared at the photo of him in his prime, then turned to the mirror again, the power she'd wrapped herself in suddenly looked thin, like a costume, and beneath it, a crack. Quiet, but growing. She sat down, breath unsteady, because for the first time in years, Camille Laurent didn't feel strong. She felt small and ashamed. She realizes what she robbed Marcus of, and of herself. The janitor's locker room was always cold. Flickering light, rusted vents, rows of metal doors holding everything no one cared about. Marcus stepped inside slowly after his shift, shoulders sore, hands raw from disinfectant. He opened his locker, expecting the usual towel gloves. The photo of Lena he taped above the shelf. But something new was there, an envelope unmarked. He stared at it for a moment, then sat on the wooden bench and opened it with care. No paycheck, no pink slip. Inside was thick cardstock. An invitation. Mr. Marc Chevalier, you are cordially invited to represent Laurent Capital at the International Language and Diplomacy Forum. Attendance optional, but encouraged. Below it, Camille's signature, not stamped, signed by hand. He ran a thumb across the ink, like he didn't trust it to be real. Footsteps echoed behind him. It was Isabelle. She nodded toward the letter. She didn't know how to say sorry. Marcus folded it carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. She just did. Isabelle hesitated. Will you go? He looked at the empty hallway beyond the locker room door, then at the floor beneath his boots, still dirty. I don't know, but his voice sounded different now. Not afraid, just deciding. He opens it. It's not a job. It's an invitation. Marcus stood in front of the conference room door, a borrowed suit draped over his frame. The collar tugged at his neck like it remembered another man, one he hadn't been in years. Inside, the table was lined with executives and foreign delegates. Papers shuffled. Laptops glowed. Camille sat at the head of the table, guarded but composed. She looked up when he entered. A brief pause. No one stood. No one clapped. But all eyes shifted. Marcus walked to the chair at the far end, not the janitor's corner this time, a seat prepared for him, a microphone in front of it. Camille cleared her throat. As part of our efforts to move forward with the merger, she said evenly, we've asked Mr. Chevalier to interpret during today's meeting. She looked at him. Publicly, Marcus sat down slowly, his back straight. A French delegate spoke first. Technical terms, legal nuances, veiled mistrust. Marcus listened carefully, not just to the words, but the tone behind them. Then he spoke. Fluent, controlled, elegant. Every phrase balanced like a bridge built in midair. People leaned in. Pens stopped moving. He wasn't translating. He was commanding silence. By the time he finished, no one looked at Camille. They looked at him. He folded his hands, waiting. Camille blinked, lips pressed together. She had brought him in to show change, but she hadn't expected him to own the room, and he had. Word by word, Marcus says, "I'll do it." But on my terms, Camille closed the conference room door behind them. Marcus stood at the window, looking out over the city, not out of awe, but calculation. The skyline didn't intimidate him. Not anymore. She cleared her throat. "You were impressive," she said. He didn't turn around. "I wasn't trying to be." A pause. She stepped closer. "I wanted to say thank you. For today," still he stayed quiet. Camille finally sighed. "What do you want, Marcus?" He turned, calm. "My name is Marc Chevalier." She blinked. "I want 3 things," he said. 1, no more mop closets. If I speak for your company, I do it with dignity, of course, to my daughter. Her scholarship is hanging by a thread. You fixed the housing form. Officially, she hesitated, then nodded. I can make that happen. 3. He paused. Camille raised a brow. "There's more. A letter," he said softly. "For her, from you. Not for ballet. For belief." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I need her to know the world sees her, even the parts of it that once looked away." Camille swallowed hard. For the first time, she saw the man in front of her not as a threat to her pride, but as a father building something from broken stone. "I'll write it. Tonight," she said. Marcus nodded. Once business done. But something else, something humans settled between them, the beginning of a different kind of respect. Camille signs it visibly unsettled. The room buzzed with murmurs and caffeine. French investors sat shoulder to shoulder with Laurent Capital's board. Projected charts blinked on the wall. Phrases like asset restructure and cross-border synergy floated in the air. But all eyes slowly turned to the man at the end of the table. Marcus, no mop, no gloves, just a tailored navy suit and presence that stilled the room. He flipped open the translated dossier in front of him. French delegate leaned forward. "Your terms read vague in this section, Mr. Chevalier." Strategic flexibility. What does that mean in real terms? Without missing a beat, Marcus replied, first in French, then seamlessly in English. "It means your rights aren't diluted post-merger. It ensures autonomy for your region, without sacrificing Laurent's equity." Another executive nodded slowly. "That's actually very clear." Camille watched from the side of the table. Arms folded, but Marcus continued, interpreting, navigating, disarming tension with every phrase. And when one investor challenged the wording in a clause, Marcus leaned in. In diplomatic language, words are weapons or bridges. This phrase builds one thing, and the investor leaned back, visibly impressed by the end of the meeting. The room had shifted, not from votes, from weight. Marcus didn't just belong there. He owned the silence that followed. The French delegate turned to Camille, whispering, "Why wasn't he running this from the beginning?" Camille didn't answer, because the real answer sat across from her, alive and no longer invisible. A French delegate says, "Why wasn't he running this?" The office door clicked shut behind her. Camille leaned against it, shoulders tense, breath uneven. The meeting had ended hours ago, but Marcus's voice still echoed in her head, calm, fluent, undeniable. The way the board had looked at him, the way Arnaud had smiled, like she'd merely introduced them to someone they already revered. And she had. Too late, she crossed the room and sank into her chair, removing her heels with an uncharacteristic lack of grace. Her feet ached. Her pride ached more. She stared at the framed certificate on the wall. Top 30 under 30 Forbes, a younger version of herself, smiling, sharp. But it felt hollow now. The office was too quiet. A knock came. Isabel peeked in. "Everything okay?" Camille looked up. Her voice cracked slightly. "Was I ever enough?" Isabel stepped in slowly. "Enough for what?" Camille laughed, bitter, quiet. "I climbed every rung, spoke perfect English, perfect numbers. No accent, no softness. And I still feel like the least qualified person in the room." "You're not," Isabel said gently. "You just never allowed yourself to break." Camille looked down. "I envy him," she whispered. "Marcus, he lost everything, and somehow still walks like he knows exactly who he is." Isabel sat across from her. Maybe that's because he does. Camille's hands trembled slightly as she pressed her palms to her eyes. I don't. Isabel didn't offer advice, just silence. And for the first time in years, Camille let it sit. Unpolished, unperformed, real, the assistant says. You still have a choice. The mailbox groaned as Marcus pulled it open. Bills, flyers, one cream-colored. Envelope. His heart skipped. He turned it over slowly. No logo, just a wax seal and Lena's full name, handwritten in careful script. He held it for a long moment before calling out, Lena. She rushed over barefoot, her hair in a messy bun, eyes wide. What is it? He handed her the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. She read in silence, eyes scanning each line once. Then again, her lips parted, but no sound came. Marcus crouched beside her. Baby? She looked up. They accepted me, she whispered. Full scholarship, everything. His chest swelled relief, pride, disbelief, all tangled. They said someone from the company personally vouched for me, she added. A formal recommendation. From the CEO, Marcus blinked. He hadn't asked for that. Camille had done it herself. Lena flung her arms around him. I get to dance. Papa, for real. He closed his eyes as her arms squeezed tighter. I knew you would, he whispered. He didn't say thank you to the wind, but in his chest he did. And on Camille's desk, a carbon copy of that same letter rested under a photo of her. Mother, signed, sealed, redeeming something words alone could never fix. It's signed by Camille Dusk. Settled over the city in amber and violet streaks, Marcus and Lena sat on the rooftop of their building legs. Dangling over the ledge, a blanket beneath them, the envelope between them like a flame that hadn't gone out. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Below, car horns blinked. Somewhere, a siren cried out. But up here, it was just wind and wonder. I used to think Paris was the only place I'd ever felt whole, Marcus said softly, watching the horizon dot. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. Because of Mama. Because of what we had. The life, the music, the language. I thought when we left, I lost all of it. He paused. But now, I think Paris wasn't a place, it was a moment. Lena closed her eyes. You carried it with you, Papa, even when you didn't know. He turned to her. You're going to go places I'll never see, but promise me you'll take pieces of this with you. I will, even the broken ones, especially the broken ones, she said. He smiled. They watched the sun slide behind the buildings, and for once, Marcus didn't feel like a man trying to return somewhere. He felt like he was already home right here, right now, with her. Marcus says, Then I will translate the world for you. The envelope was thick and cream-colored, just like Lena's. But this one was addressed to Mr. Mark, Chevalier, and guest. It arrived late in the afternoon, slipped beneath the apartment door like a quiet dare. Marcus opened it carefully. Inside, an invitation. Laurent Capital Winter Gala, celebrating renewal and recognition. Formal attire requested. He stared at it for a long time. The last time he stood in that ballroom, he was wiping footprints from the marble. Lena peeked over his shoulder. What's that? He handed it to her. Her eyes lit up. Are you going? I don't know. She tilted her head. You're invited, he exhaled slowly. I was also erased in that room. Lena walked to the corner and pulled out a box, the one with Elise's old scarf, folded neatly. Inside, she wrapped it around his neck. Then, maybe it's time they remember. He looked at her, this small force of light, who'd never let the world define her father by his silence. You want to come with me? He asked. She grinned. Only if I can wear red. He laughed. The sound was rare and welcome. He looked down at the envelope one more time. Not a peace offering, but maybe an opening. Marcus hesitates. Lena wants to go. The mirror was small and cracked in one corner, but it held the truth all the same. Marcus stood in front of it, fingers fumbling with a tie he hadn't worn in over 6 years. The fabric still smelled faintly of cedar and old music halls. Lena peeked from behind the curtain. He looked at her through the mirror. I used to know how to do this. She walked over and fixed it, clumsily, but with pride. Then she stepped back. Marcus turned and his breath caught. Lena stood in the red dress. It wasn't flashy, no sequins, no glitter, but it fit her like a promise. Her mother's earrings shimmered gently in her ears. Do I look? Okay? She asked. He nodded slowly. You look like someone the world won't forget. She smiled, cheeks pink. So do you. They stepped out into the hallway. No mop, no janitor's cart. Just a father and daughter, rising. When they reached the building, the doors opened not with silence, but with welcome. Inside. Chandeliers glowed. Music played soft and bright. People turned as they entered. Marcus held Lena's hand, chin high. He wasn't a guest by accident. He was there because he belonged. Because the boy from Paris, the ghost in the halls, the janitor in silence. They were all the same man. And tonight, he walked back in as himself. Fully, they step into the ballroom as equals. The ballroom shimmered with soft light and polished wealth. Strings played in the background. Champagne flutes clinked quietly. Conversation drifted like perfume. Marcus stepped onto the marble floor. Lena beside him, their steps quiet but unshaken. A few people turned. Some paused mid-sentence. And then came the whispers. Isn't that the janitor? No, that's him. The translator, the French guy. I thought he got fired. I heard he used to work for the UN. Camille noticed him from across the room. For a moment, her eyes widened, not from surprise, but from the way he carried himself. Suit pressed, tie perfect. Posture, calm, no mop, no apology. Just presence. He didn't search for approval. He didn't smile at the right people. He simply existed in full color. In a room that had once seen him only in grayscale, Lena's hand slipped into his. Are you okay? She asked. He looked down at her, then back at the crowd. The murmurs had quieted. I'm more than okay, he said. A few investors nodded toward him. One even stepped forward with a handshake. Marcus returned it without flinching, not out of pride, but out of peace. Because he didn't need to be feared. Just seen. And tonight, he was. A whisper. That's the janitor. The lights dimmed slightly. A soft hush fell across the ballroom as a spotlight slid toward the small platform in the center. Transformed now into a dance floor. A voice spoke over the gentle clatter of silverware. For a special performance tonight, Lena Laurent. Marcus turned to her. She stood frozen for a second, dressed glowing under the light, hands shaking. You don't have to, he whispered. She looked up at him, nervous, wide-eyed. But something steady burned in her gaze. I want to. She stepped forward, alone. The music began, a slow instrumental, violin and piano like a memory unfolding. Lena moved. The first steps were cautious, soft. But as she twirled, her body remembered what her heart already knew. She danced for her mother, for the letters hidden in a shoebox. She danced for her father, not as janitor, not as ghost, but as bridge. Each turn was a sentence. Each leap, a name reclaimed. No glitter, no spotlight theatrics, just breath, bare feet. And truth. Camille stood watching from the far corner. Her hand covered her mouth because the girl wasn't just dancing. She was telling the whole room what Marcus had never said aloud. That dignity can't be erased. That history leaves marks, even if you mop them away. The music ended silence, and then Camille clapped once, then again, and again, until the whole room followed. But Marcus didn't clap. He just watched his daughter glow in a light she had earned. And in that moment, nothing was missing, not even Elise. Camille claps first and longest. The applause faded slowly, like ripples after a stone. Lena stepped down from the platform, cheeks flushed, eyes shining. Marcus met her halfway and wrapped her in a quiet, steady hug. Across the ballroom, Camille set her glass down and walked toward them. The crowd parted around her like water around a stone. She stopped in front of Marcus, her expression unreadable. For a moment, no one breathed. Then she spoke, not loud, not soft. Just true, Mr. Chevalier. He looked her in the eye. I owe you more than silence, she began. More than an envelope. More than an invitation. Lena looked between them, her hand still gripping Marcus's. Camille inhaled slowly. I owe you an apology. A few heads turned. She continued this time in fluent, practiced French. Je vous ai mal juge, je vous ai efface, je vous demande pardon. I misjudged you. I erased you. I ask your forgiveness. Closing parenthesis. Marcus didn't blink. He didn't bow. He simply said, in clear English, I accept it. Camille nodded, eyes glossy but proud. You taught me something I never learned at the top. What's that? He asked. She looked at Lena. That power means nothing, if it costs you grace. Then she stepped back into the crowd, letting the silence finish what words could not. Marcus turned to Lena. She whispered, "What did she say?" He smiled faintly. "She finally heard me." Marcus nods. Nothing more. Power in silence. The morning after the gala was quiet. No music, no heels. Just soft shoes and warm light. Marcus and Lena stood outside the old ballet studio, the one with the fogged glass where he used to watch her from the sidewalk. The window still had smudges from months ago, maybe years. He looked at it now with a kind of reverence and regret. "I used to stand here," he said, "every morning, watching you dance." "I know," Lena whispered. He glanced at her. "I saw your reflection," she said. "Always thought you were a ghost." He smiled. "I was." They walked up the steps together. Inside, the receptionist looked up, older woman, gentle smile, recognition in her eyes. Marcus stepped forward. "We'd like to enroll, of course, for your daughter." He nodded. "She's ready." Lena smiled proudly. "And your role?" the woman asked. He paused, then said, simply, "Translator, not janitor, not former interpreter, not forgotten, just the bridge." Still standing, she handed them the forms, and for the first time, Marcus didn't hesitate before signing his name. Not the one he buried, the one he reclaimed. Marc Chevalier. Lena took his hand as they walked to the practice room. Behind them, the glass window sat clean and open. No fog between them anymore. He enrolls her himself as her translator. The studio floor squeaked under worn ballet shoes. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, landing in golden squares across polished wood. The room was still, save for the slow rhythm of breath and the quiet creak of stretching limbs. Lena stood at the bar, focused, her shoulders drawn back, her gaze steady. The instructor, a poised woman with silver hair and ballet scars on her ankles, watched silently. Lena began to move ply. Relative turn, but it wasn't just movement. There was something else in her body now, precision from her father, fluidity from her mother. Her fingers curved with emotion, her lines held story. She danced like someone whose story didn't begin with ease, and wouldn't end with applause. Marcus sat just outside the doorway, watching. He didn't film it, didn't clap, just watched with hands folded and eyes full. Inside, the instructor moved slowly toward her assistant and whispered, "She dances like someone who knows grief." The assistant asked, "Is that a weakness?" The instructor shook her head. "No, that's the kind of strength you can't teach." Lena landed her final step and looked toward the door. Her father gave her a small nod, and she smiled. Not because she had danced well, but because she had danced whole. The instructor whispers, "She dances like someone who knows grief." The hallway closet hadn't been opened in months, maybe years. Marcus stood in front of it, fingers resting on the knob, breath shallow, like the door held back more than just belongings. Lena peeked into the room. "What's in there?" He didn't answer right away. When he finally opened it, dust swirled into the light like memory dot. At the bottom, a dark blue suitcase, scuffed quiet, he pulled it out and placed it on the bed. The zipper stuck, but he eased it open. Inside, a pressed shirt, a tie, an old cassette player with Elisa's voice on tape, and a passport expired, but still bearing his photos. Still stamped Chevalier. "This was packed the day after your mother's funeral," he said softly. "I was going to leave, to disappear." "But you didn't," Lena whispered. "I almost did. In every way." He pulled out the shirt, still folded, still stiff. Then slowly, gently, he began to unpack. One item at a time, not because he needed the space, but because he was no longer running from it. The past wasn't something to escape. It was something to carry lighter when shared. He handed Lena the cassette player. "Want to hear her voice?" he asked. Lena nodded, holding it like treasure. And in that room, with the suitcase finally empty, they listened to her laugh. 2 old French lullabies, to everything they thought they'd lost. He finally unpacks it. The desk in the corner had never seen much use, but tonight, Lena sat there, elbows planted, pen in hand. Hair tied back in a loose ribbon. A blank page weighted beneath her fingers. She took a breath, then wrote, "Dear Mama, I danced today. Not just steps. I danced like I remembered something I never knew I knew you. She paused, chewing the cap of the pen. Papa was watching. But not like before. He wasn't afraid anymore. He stands taller now, not because people clap, but because he does when no one else sees. Her handwriting wobbled with the weight of the words. He speaks again. Not just to others, but to himself. He smiles more. And sometimes when he thinks, I'm not looking, he whispers your name like a song only he remembers. She blinked, then continued, Thank you for leaving your voice in his silence. I think we both hear it now. She signed her name with care, folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope. She placed it next to her scholarship acceptance letter, side by side, as if both were needed for her to begin. Marcus stood at the doorway, quiet. You want me to mail it? He asked gently. She looked up. No, she said with a smile. She's already heard it. And with that, she blew out the candle. She places it beside her acceptance letter. The hallway at Laurent Capital hadn't changed. Same white walls, same cold tiles, same silence. But the man walking them, he was different. Marcus stepped through the glass doors, wearing a dark coat over a crisp shirt. No mop, no gloves. No badge clipped to his chest, just presence, as he passed the reception desk. A young intern paused mid-conversation. Isn't that? The receptionist nodded. Yes, that's him, not the janitor. Just him. Marcus walked slowly, not out of hesitation, but purpose. Each step echoed, not because the halls were empty, but because he wasn't anymore. He passed the conference room where he once cleaned. Crumbs off marble, he passed the elevator where he was fired. He passed Camille's office. She stood inside, watching him through the glass dot. No words exchanged, only a nod of apology, of understanding. At the end of the hall, he paused at the window. The reflection stared back, not Marcus, the custodian of silence, but Marc Chevalier, father, interpreter, bridge. He closed his eyes. Outside, the city moved on, but inside something settled, not an ending, a beginning. He turned and walked away, the hallway behind him quiet, and the man in the glass no longer waiting to be seen. Camera lingers on his reflection in the glass, not janitor, not translator, just father.